Hello, folks. This is Michael with the Reason RX podcast and my co-host,
Melanie,
in Minnesota.
That's right.
So, we're here today talking to Janet Oliver. She has a business called Plan for Learning and Living, and we're going to talk with her today about a lot of different things. Human psychology, neurology, learning, behavior, environment. It's an important thing for a lot of parents and teachers and school administrators. We've got to realize that learning does not occur just in a classroom. We can't have that idea that it's just in a book, kind of like compartmentalize things. There's too much of that, partly because of the history of like Western culture with some bad philosophy from like John Dewey and Plato. We got to look at things more like good educators did, like Maria Montessori. She knew that without even, she doesn't have the full theory like J.J. Gibson did and some others, but she knew that kids needed to move around at a certain age and manipulate and work with their environment and be outside and garden and learn tasks and stuff and not just sit still like a dead human in a coffin. We shouldn't just sit still and try to assimilate information. There's too much of that idea in modern classrooms and more push for it, getting rid of recess. Oh, well, if we're going to have the kids do better, we need to have them sit still and read more and start at an earlier age and stuff like that. No, that's like not looking at how humans really function. It's not human nature. But a lot of those ideas are how learning is structured on, even if it's implicit, even if it's not explicit. A lot of learning is structured that way. That's how people act. Even if you think you're not, if you step back and look at what are you really doing, you might find some of those premises in your thinking. Because, hell, I used to do that. No one's perfect. We all have stuff to learn. We grow up. We learn some things implicitly in the culture. You kind of take it for granted. And you got to stop and be curious and discover what's best, or ask, as we've talked about in prior podcasts, what's the history of this idea? Where does it come about? We got to realize if we really look at good theorists of education and philosophers and theorists of perception like J.J. Gibson or Boyd of the OODA loop, OODA, human beings perceive in an environment as we move through it. We need to have a good environment and ecology to learn properly and think and live and thrive. And so there's this whole feedback loop, just like kind of sort of like an analogy of like what Boyd said with the OODA loop, OODA. You can look him up. We'll put him in the show notes and some of this other stuff. But Janet is going to be talking about that with us, about looking holistically at people. Help us flesh out what that really means instead of just throwing around the word. Just like some people throw around the word Montessori. Just because someone calls themselves a Montessori teacher in Montessori school does not mean they are.
Right.
You need to really dig into it. So Janet will be helping us flesh out some of those concepts and learn more about how to teach better, how to be a better parent, how learning really occurs, what we can do for ourselves to like take care of some issues we might have.
Mm-hmm. And I've had the pleasure of seeing Janet in action, actually, with my own son. She's really completely, it's amazing the turnaround in my own son. And it was very, very quick. It didn't take long. And things were becoming, and we'll get into that maybe a little, Janet. You can kind of explain what you noticed and how it worked and all of that. But so Janet has a couple centers here in the Twin Cities that you can go to and bring your child. There's a lot of things that she can recognize and things that are just not quite clicking right. And that was how it was kind of for our son. And it just, so I would wholeheartedly recommend you get in touch with Janet, adult or youth. So yeah, she's amazing, remarkable. So we should ask her to.
And then she does, you do internet work also, internet consultations.
Yeah.
And then if you want, she can fly out somewhere and do a workshop or give a course or maybe work with a school or a student around the country or around the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
So, Janet, tell us about your.
Okay. Hi. I am a neurodevelopmental specialist. Those words are chosen pretty carefully, and we could talk a little bit about that. But I have been in this field for over 20 years, and one of the first, I think, when I first started doing neurodevelopment, we were just, the internet wasn't even that new. It was pretty new back then. We had like 1,000 hits on that word. Now there's, millions and millions and millions of them. So it has grown a lot in that period. I got very interested in the very beginning. I was a Montessori teacher, so I am very much, that's what trained me in observation and watching children. And because that was one of Montessori's great theories was you learn by watching. Yeah. And that training was very important to what I ended up doing because I would see things I didn't understand and nobody ever would understand. Like I watched a child sit on a very one of those nice old-fashioned wooden chairs that very stable, and the girl just fell right off the chair. She fell right over, not on purpose. She just fell over like unconsciously. I was like, what was that? People don't do that. That's odd. And I would see all these things, very, very intelligent children who were just struggling so much with just so many things. And I was like, well, what is that? What am I seeing? And I was very fortunate because, and then my own children who also were having some differences, I call them, because they were very unusual kind of learners. And we had just moved to Minnesota when my first daughter entered first grade, and it was a crash and burn situation. Very, very brilliant girl. She's now a woman, but at the time a girl. And, she went through, and by second grade, they're saying, well, she has learning disabilities. Really? Because we never saw those. I don't know what they're talking about. But they ended up telling me in fourth grade that she would never learn to read properly, and she would never be anything but an average student. And I just had to get used to it because she was bright, but she would never get extra help
like
because
Thomas
she was
Edison.
too steady. Right, exactly. I mean, there was no help for you. And I said, well, that's nice. Thank you very much. I'm taking my child out of school, because what am I going to do? I mean, I couldn't allow that. That just sounded like terrible. And so all these things worked together for me. And just at that time, like so much of life, that's when all the new neuroscience was starting to take off. They started to have scans. We started to understand more about how the brain worked. And we started to understand the sensory motor system and the importance of the body-brain connection and how those things work together. And that was eye-opening. And I was very fortunate to get in with some very wonderful people. Dr. Lyle Palmer of Winona, he's emeritus now. He was a person who worked with Chance to Grow and other places that were working with sensory motor things. And he was giving courses, and I took everything he had because it just totally clicked for me. But it seemed to be not very well organized. Like, in other words, it was like kind of all over the place, and you had to kind of make your own order. And I was like struggling with all the complexity because there was a lot of complexity in it. And I was having trouble, hammering it down to how I could hold on to all this information. And just then a friend from Seattle, because I used to live in Seattle, sent me a information about the Handel Institution, which is where I end up getting my neurodevelopmental training. But when he sent me their information, they organized it all. They had a complete organization of how the sensory motor development happens over time. And that woke me up to, oh my goodness, this is it. I found something. So in my master's degree, I got my training in neurodevelopment from with the Handel Institute as well. So I got my certification through them, and I understanding the importance of how our sensory processing and our motor processing are interacting and how they develop over time and how important. One thing you mentioned about schools is very, very important, but I'm all the way back into like in utero birth, right after birth, the things that we've changed in early childhood just in the way we deal with children. We're starting to come back from it a little tiny bit, but oh my goodness, we were in some really bad spots there for a while with not allowing movement, not encouraging typical baby movement or toddler movement, or, everything was trying to get them not to do all these things. Like, how can we control them? And even the playpen, the original idea, you get the idea, you need safety sometimes, but these chairs, the little chairs and the little, they ended up not helping because they thought, the baby's up in a chair, they can see us and they can learn more. Well, no, you're in a little chair, you're not moving, and you're not doing typical development, which have to do with your eyes, your ear development, how you see, how you hear, how you touch, how you feel things, your motor tone, and even our birth practices, how we have in some places it's up to 60% C-sections now. That alone, I mean, when we're born, it's a motor activity for that baby. That baby is using a lot of different motor things, not volitionally, but reflexively. And those things are transformed from in utero, where there's no or a little gravity, buoyancy, into a gravity state that is much, much heavier. And being able to work in gravity is one of the things I work with. It's like, gravity sense is a huge thing that we don't, and it starts right away. Like, it starts in utero, and then it starts through the birth process, and then it goes into the early childhood, including the toddlerhood, and then preschool, and then later. We should be really having our gravity sense be in a well-developed place, but we're finding more and more children are not. I mean, that whole thing. And what I mean by gravity sense is our inner ear and our cerebellum area that deal with the tone of our muscles and how quickly they can react to things and how they can be controlled by the voluntary brain part of the brain. So that is not, if you don't have that ability, then you are not moving your muscles as much as your reflexes or lower brain is moving them, and you don't have the kind of mastery and control that you need, right? So that's so working with the gravity sense through the vestibular sense and through the tone and through the body muscles themselves. These are essential to be able to use your eye muscles, even hearing. Is those little bones that are in your ear that everyone learns, those 3 little bones, they're connected with things, and those can actually be too low in tone, and so you're not taking in sound properly. All these things are connected in how we use our body. So we need free play. We need a lot of that. Green time, very important. They found that it's better for depression and hyperactivity than anything else in the medication even. So it's very important that kids have that, but they also need a good eye to see that they are going through developmental stages in ways that are healthy. Because what we see is parents go, why didn't anyone tell me this before? Because you see something that should have been seen in infancy, really. And they do check reflexes often in primitive reflexes in infancy, but they don't know what to do about it. All they want to know is, do you have some kind of brain lesion or something? Well, reflexes, immature, atypical reflexes aren't just because of brain lesions. That's one way. But there's also other ways in development that they don't get what they need, so they don't develop appropriately. And that's one of my major interests. Getting my doctoral thesis is on the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex and how it affects reading and math as well. And by the way, it came up significant. The idea here is that these things are connected in how we hear, how we see, how we feel, how we touch, how we take in information, in things we hold, spatial relationship. And spatial relationship has so much to do with everything. It has to do with math and our understanding. So a 3-dimensional good example of that. Some people don't understand how that works, but like a child who has autism, their eyes don't work together well. They use their peripheral vision, or they use holistic vision. They don't have their eyes tracking together well. They don't have a lot of things are going on with that. Well, what you'll see often with a young child with autism is they'll get up at the very top of a very high place and they're not afraid at all. And they'll go, look at that. They're not afraid at all. Yeah, that's because they don't see three-dimensionally. And they don't know there's something to be afraid of. And so once that kicks in, they'll suddenly, oh my gosh, I'm up here, Yeah, because that three-dimensional space visually starts kicking in and they understand what that means. Yeah, that is something you need to be worried about. Sometimes, you're in a high situation. You need to be careful with your body in that situation. So these have to do with safety. They have to do with social things. Like people talk about eye contact. I'm not so worried about eye contact as social referencing. That's Stephen Gutstein's work on that. But being able to take in what is being said non-verbally means you have had to feel it in your own body. And you probably know about mirror neurons and all that. But when you do something and you watch someone do something, if you watch somebody do something, you're having that same feeling. So if you watch somebody walk across a tightrope, and they're walking and they're wiggling, you're watching that, you're feeling that. You're like tensing your body and you're actually trying to get them over that line because you can feel it in your body that strongly. And so that's how we pick up social cue. We when we're looking at somebody, we feel it in their body. And if you don't feel in your body, that's trouble. Like people with autism, that's a really high example of that, not having that. We don't feel it in our body, so we don't always, when we see somebody, we're not taking that in, and we're not developing that over time. But these things are all, I call these shadow syndromes. You're talking about yourself earlier with these different spectrums, but everybody's on some part of the spectrum, either autism spectrum or ADHD spectrum or dyslexia spectrum. I mean, everybody is. Yeah.
I was going to interject a quick, Janet. Do you think, you know how like every time we have a baby, we're told get them in for their 6-week checkup, their 2-month, their 6-month, all that. What about a checkup with someone in your field here so that baby, because I wish we would have, known about this way long ago.
I am so for that.
Better late than never, I would think, right? But
right. You can do it anytime in life. I mean, because we're neurally plastic. I've worked. My youngest client was 7 days old. My youngest one. My oldest one is 90. So I work on the whole life. Your whole life, you have an ability to change your neuro interactions. Sometimes it's more limited, but still, I've worked with people who have brain injury, who have had gunshot wounds and all kinds in the head, all kinds of stuff. And those people still get, can still find improvement in their situation. So yes, when babies are little, doctors, they don't know what to do. They've not taught this. They really aren't.
Mm-hmm.
They understand, they're looking for very specific things, but they don't understand the developmental component of these. Most of them do not. And I wish they had more of a pattern like this, because my granddaughter, who had some problems, she had a cord wrapped around. That happens for lots of reasons, but she had trouble getting born. She had to have a C-section. All these things happen in modern life, and I'm glad she's here and alive. But she needed a lot of right away. A lot of input, because there were things I saw immediately, and they can be easily remediated. These things are not, they're traumas of a type, right? I work with trauma in the body. So in utero or birth or after birth, and they can be physical or emotional. When we talk about emotions, but what are emotions? You don't have any emotions if you don't feel them, right? And you feel something through your body. So even that's a bodily reaction to something, right? We have a mental construct, but really we feel things in our body. And that's part of the very important ability to develop emotional things, attachment, other things like that have to do with this physical development part we're talking about. We sometimes undercut it. It's only physical. And we think that mental and emotional and physical are all separate. They are not separate. They are all one system that we are working with. And, our idea with my work is, subtle, anything people ask me often, when do I come to see you? I say, it's when you feel there's something in the way of getting you being able to achieve, or you being able to do, or you being able to understand about yourself that is bothering you enough that you want to get help for it, because a lot of people come for very subtle things, they're very small, but hi. So anyway, that is how we we look at these things. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. It'd be good if we got more advanced and people started having movement screens. But a lot of this is to come together. It's got to be more in the culture. People got to learn more about the importance of movement, learn more about J.J. Gibson and ecological perception and ecological psychology, learn more about our evolutionary nature, learn more about epigenetics, because there's so much we can unpack in some of this stuff you've been saying. But if people would have movement screens when they're young, like 2 months, 6 months, a year, whatever, have movement screens, have a specialist who can prescribe, instead of an RX, have a movement RX, because it's the same thing. It's like, it's not do whatever you want. You do whatever you want, and look at the problems that a lot of people in modern Europe and America and Asian countries and people who are adopting some of the Western lifestyles have. Western society has a lot of great things in it, but it's got a lot of crap in it too. A lot of bad ideas. And so if people would learn more about the importance of movement, we could have movement screens and movement prescriptions, and that would help us in many ways. And Janet, do you know about Katie Bowman?
Katie Bowman, no, I do not.
Okay, I'll have to send you some information about her, but she's got a degree in physics, does biomechanics, and she's all over this stuff. She does some of the same things from a different perspective, but coming at it a different way, but doing some of the same things, helping people when they're younger, and helping parents develop their kids properly. She talks about, for example, when how something when you're young has profound consequences later, as you say, because people have some goofy ideas have become instituted in our culture. So then there's, for example, less breastfeeding. And so then kids are using the bottles and stuff. Oh, big deal. It's just a bottle. Who cares? Okay. But when we dig into it, that has profound consequences.
Yeah.
Never mind the nutrition.
Yeah. Can I name you a few?
Yeah.
And I don't want women to feel guilty if for some reason they can't breastfeed. You can make up for that, but breastfeeding it develops eye muscles, hearing, interhemispheric integration in the brain. It helps the vagus nerve become organized because the vagus nerve goes in the back of the tongue. And as you rhythmically moving that nerve, you're actually calming that nerve. That's why babies often go to sleep when they're sucking. It's something that if we don't do those things, yes, we can learn them other ways. It's not the end of the world, but it makes it harder. So we shouldn't be discouraging people from doing things, but we should. It's hard not to make people nervous and guilty about these things as well. I have to be very careful about that.
Remember, it's not your fault.
Because there's things that happen, right?
Ideas in the culture,
but it's important.
Fault. Yeah,
right. But realize that that's important and needs to be addressed. If you haven't had breastfeeding, you're going to have certain issues with facial reflexes and other things. I've seen people with hyperactive rooting reflex, from that, which means that if you touch the cheek, the lips all go in all different directions. I always like to say that, I don't know if you remember, ages me a bit, but when George Bush would talk, he did not get breastfed. I can tell because his mouth was all over the place, and he couldn't articulate well, and he had problems with that. And I always said, Barbara, what were you doing? So that was, you can sometimes just see these things in everyday life, just walking down, the street. I see different people, that are, you should have, your mom, what did she do? So these things with, now we've come back to being important things like tummy time. Tummy time is so misunderstood, and people had such a hard time. Well, my child didn't like it. Well, no child likes it at the beginning. You start with a tummy time for seconds, not minutes, and what nobody ever tells them, whether a parent this, they don't tell them this, and they think, oh, they're not down there for 15 minutes, so that, they don't like it, so I won't do it anymore. Well, tummy time is extremely important for development of vision, of posture, of the neck, of many areas. And the minute someone walks in, I can see, need more of that. Especially in our world where everything's on screens and things, we're we're always moving forward in a hunched position. That really, without having that. So, and tummy time, of course, is a long, the entire movement arc of going from tummy time to squat sitting to crawling, then pulling up and toddling and cruising and then walking, all are one movement. It's just one arc, and so if any of that is disrupted, you're going to have different things that are going to be interfered with. Now, it's not the end of the world, because some people don't crawl for lots of reasons, but that doesn't make it mean that you're going to get away with that, quote unquote. You're going to have something has to intervene to help with that.
And what do you mean by tummy time? Can you define that for the audience?
Tummy time, yeah. Well, when a baby is very young, from the time they're about 2 months old on until they're crawling, which is usually around 6, 7, 8 months old, you're going to have a time when the baby needs to be on their tummy, and they're going to pull themselves, because of the reflex, the symmetrical tonic neck reflex. Baby raises their head, their arms fold in front of them, so they look like distinct, sort of. They're up on their elbows and they're on their tummy with their legs straight, right? And they can see. This is the first time a baby really should be able to look distant and close. So they're accommodating vision during this time. So something's close. Oh, look at the little ball by my hand. Oh, look, the kitty just ran by. They can lift their head, look down, look up. And up until that time, they really have been either on their back, or being carried around or propped up. They haven't really been able to move their own neck to allow for that development. So this is the first time volitionally a child can change their focus and really turn their head and look at things. It's really opened up the world to you. And it is important because when you're in this position, it puts a lot of development, a lot of flexion in the back between the shoulder blades. And for posture, rather than slumping forward, I call them the chicken wings, when people are all slumped forward, that's what hangs your whole body, is those muscles between the shoulder blades. That is when that develops. Now, it's interesting that right around that same area is where the nerves for the stomach and digestion are. So it also is interesting that a baby about between 2 and 3, 4 months, that's when they start solid foods. It's the same time that they're starting tummy time, where they're actually activating those nerves in the back. Okay, so these are good examples of little small developmental things that can make big differences. I've had people who never developed that, who get into middle age and their digestion's just terrible, just terrible. They never develop the tone in the stomach from being on your tummy. You're really rolling on those muscles, on that, and they've never developed the neck differences, and so they're thrust forward. Often they have mouth breathing due to that. I mean, so many things are connected to very simple past things that just either didn't happen or didn't happen right or didn't happen long enough when you were much, much younger. And like I said, I don't like to guilt people in. It's never too late. It's good for parents who are going to know that babies need to physically be challenged, even really pretty young. What I mean by challenged is just given opportunities, not being propped up in little chairs or in car seats forever. There was a time there in the early 2000s when people just never got their kid out of a car seat. Like they'd take the car seat and put it in the stroller and take the stroller and put it on their house, and they'd change them in the things. I was like, and then I saw one that had a video screen embedded in the handle, and I said, oh dear, we are really in trouble here. This is not where we need this to go. They got to get out of those chairs, because they're not in no time in development of human history have little babies been propped up in chairs for long periods of time. Just not a thing.
I mentioned that my son had what was determined to be acid reflux from birth. I mean, if you lay him on his side, or milk would just start rolling back out. the crying didn't stop for 6 weeks. And finally, I just said to the doctor, you've got to figure out what's wrong with him. I was carrying him all the time. I was wearing wrist braces because my
wow.
so sore from carrying him all the time. This is the boy you've been working with. And but what's interesting, Janet, hearing all of that you said now about the sitting them up and don't let them on their tummy. I was told, do not put him on his tummy. Keep him sitting up. Make sure that action goes back. Use gravity. All of that stuff. So for like the first year or so, Janet, I'm sure other mothers, because others have said, our baby has reflux, and I'm sure they're doing the same thing. And I know we don't always know everything we don't know.
Yeah, it's important for people to realize here. We're not criticizing you.
No.
Don't feel guilty.
Right.
It's all three of us here have suffered from some of the same stuff. We're not omniscient. We don't know everything. We learned some bad ideas from the culture. We got to realize where that comes from and not take the blame personally. It doesn't mean we're a bad parent. It just means we're a human being and we don't know
what you don't know.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, reflux is interesting because that often has to do with the vagus nerve issue again, and knowing your son. And again, some of these things are genetic. You come in with genetic propensities, I call them, which means you have genetic things. Like I think that your son had lower tone, muscle tone. Lower muscle tone means it takes your muscles more energy to get up and moving, right? So there's a kind of a laxity to the muscle, and that would and that can affect a lot of things, including the tone of the nerve as well. So, and sucking helps that, but it's not the only thing. I mean, there's a lot of different parts, but being on a tummy for him would have been a big help for that. And it would have helped his stomach and his vagus nerve get stronger, but they didn't know that. They were just trying to keep him safe. And often safety concerns do account. But for somebody like that, the whole thing of back to sleep where you put a baby on their back all the time, and again, a little bit of that's kind of, SIDS, it was to help back to sleep, which is putting your baby only on the back to sleep is a thing to stop sudden infant death syndrome that was developed, and it did cut infant death syndrome, but the interesting thing was in Australia, they did a study where they stopped using detergents and bleaches on all their and only cotton bedding. They didn't have any blankets in the beds. Right. And they put plastic over the mattresses. The mattresses, because a lot of people have old mattresses that have been used many, many times and are not healthy for babies. Or they were using the lambskin, which also has used tanning things in it. And for a baby with low tone, they can't lift their head away from this stuff. And it's coming in, they're breathing it, and they were finding out that, guess what? He had just as good a result, and the babies were still sleeping on their stomach. So in other words, it isn't really sleeping on the stomach, it's being able to breathe. So whether it be chemical breathing or getting a blanket, in your face and not being able to move. But you see, we had more low tone babies who are making it. That's good, right? Because back in the day, a baby with low tone would not have been born alive probably, right? But today we can do that. And we have babies because a baby with really, really super low tone isn't able, now we have C-section, we can bring babies out. And I'm glad. This is a good thing. It's a wonderful thing. It just means we have to think differently about these things and help babies who have low tone early on to be able to have better tone, right? So some people think, you never put a baby on their tummy to sleep. Well, that's silly because once they're, 4 or 5 months old, they're already turning over. And to be honest, they should be allowed to. I encourage tummy sleeping after 4 months, since it's literally not known after 5 months old. And it's the natural way people were meant to sleep, on a firm surface on their stomach with their head. I call it the sleep position. That's actually helps your brain waves lower and helps you relax and helps you get to sleep. And that's why you see a lot of babies, but there would be parents who actually strap their children down. I'm not kidding. Even as they get older. So they do not go over onto their stomach, even when they get older. So they will not let their child roll over. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you get because people get scared and they get frightened that they're going, safety is important. We want our children to be safe, but we need to understand, if we understood why we're doing this and when we don't do this and, because doing that is stopping a lot of things. Development. We
need to learn more about causes instead of just association. Yeah. It's the media, even some scientists, like I've read books that talk about the poor ability of a lot of scientists to really do science, to really understand what it is. And then there's a lot of research about how a lot of psychological science can't be reproduced and stuff like that. But just more generally, philosophically, learning what science really is and looking for causes instead of just associations. Like, okay, if there's more sudden infant death syndrome when they're lying on their stomachs, okay, but why? Right? Let's dig into the cause to see what's really going on and take care of that instead of just like doing the wrong thing and then having other bad consequences.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And then really quick.
Right. Well,
go ahead. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just really quick before we move on in thought too much from it, but with the breastfeeding thing too, like Katie Bowman brings up some other things that are interesting about some of the biomechanics involved. You know, you can look on her site and read her books to learn more, but she'll talk about how breastfeeding is an important way that we all start using our tongue against the roof of the mouth. And so generally with breastfeeding, then the tongue is going to go to the top of the mouth. There's more pressure. That pushes the teeth out and widens the face. And then you need good diet for the bones to build. And hence like whole foods, paleo, some kind of like really good Weston A. Price regime or something, like kind of however you want to go at it, as long as it's whole foods and natural and you get the nutrients you need. But with the biomechanics thing, there's that pressure that pushes the teeth out, makes the face wider.
Also spreads the roof of the mouth, which goes up to the corpus callosum area in the brain. So cool. That too.
And then there's like, why do so many people need braces? It's not our human nature. It's because we're not living according to our nature. It's not like, oh, we're defective and deficient and oh, we got to come up with these ways to deal with it. No. If there'd be more things like breastfeeding and doing all the things Janet's talking about, then the body and the face would develop properly. People would breathe properly. There's a lot of like, people don't breathe well enough in the U.S. either. There's, in other countries, there's more mouth breathing instead of nose breathing. And they'd be better at like sleeping better, less probably like sleep apnea. People would breathe better in sports. All kinds of things. And
let's talk a little bit about the breathing. In my thing, we see that the Moro reflex often interferes with breathing or screws it up or makes it traumatic. Okay, the Moro reflex, Moro reflex, MORO reflex. Okay. It's that's named after a scientist who identified it. But it is. I mean, you'll be very aware of it. When a baby comes out, first thing when they're born, we lift them up, and they go into a open. They take a big breath. It's the first breath reflex. It's what makes that first breath happen. And because of a lot of things that happen, sometimes babies never go through that. I had a traumatic birth. And I went into Moro before I was even born. Like I was trying to go into Moro as they were pulling me out. I was breech born. They pulled me out by forceps by my head. And in doing that, and then of course there's all this stuff going on. They didn't do anything at all. My mother was knocked out. I was I was flailing and flailing. I'm sure I was screaming. And I never got out of the open, that, I was in constant hyperventilation state because of this hyperactivity that really I didn't get adjusted until I figured out about this work and got it taken care of. But that made my startle really high. It made my adrenal system run too high. It made my, my breathing was totally backwards and bad. As a matter of fact, every time I tried to do any kind of breathing exercises, I felt like I was going to die. I mean, it was because I didn't have any ability to regulate that. Those muscles from the Moro are go across the diaphragm both ways, and the tissues, not just the muscles, but the other tissues underneath there, fascia and stuff. They go back crosswise across the body, and it also has to do with emotional work. you're overly emotional, you're overly angry, overly happy. I mean, it can really put you into a hyper state of all those things because it's hard to calm down. And then you don't get calmed down. Right. So being integrated in that and knowing that was a huge thing to me because my adrenals were going off high level off like many times a day. And what happens with Moro is at first it's a gravity thing, right? You're lifting up in gravity and that it triggers this response. But later on, because you have startle, you usually have a high startle, you can go into a Moro with sound, with visual, with, anything. Like if somebody came into the room when I was there and slammed the door, I was on the ceiling, I had to pry me off the ceiling by my fingernails. I mean, I was so overreactive to sound or someone coming suddenly and I wasn't aware of it. These kind of things just really wear out a person. They take energy. They misuse energy in this feeling that you're unsafe. So so that was something that we work on, and you can see that affects the vagus nerve as well, and breathing. And like you're right, breathing is extremely important, but just doing cognitive top brain breathing, sometimes that's really helpful. I'm not saying it's not. But if you are your lower brain, especially the Moro reflex or maybe the fear paralysis response, if those things are interacting here, then you're going to have a hard time even learning to breathe. It's not going to feel right. It's going to feel scary even for you, to be honest. So, yeah.
But yeah. That's like, I don't know a lot of other systems. I know there are some, but I know MoveNat, MOVNAT, that kind of hits some of the same things, kind of follows some of the same methodology and everything. Like that's the whole idea, starting out with the basics and developing from there, because they explicitly have their system based on evolution and human development. Breathing, like how many people talk about breathing? Pretty much no one. I've talked to like some guy who had taught martial arts and yoga for a while, and he was going to do this triathlon. Met him out on the trail where I exercise out in the woods, and I was saying, how do you breathe? And he was like, I mean, when I was in high school, and I played like some sports, no one ever talked about breathing. But, so like Janet, MoveNat, very important because it's one of the things. How do you breathe? And then it's got this whole tree of movement, and it knows the fundamental, the basics is you start on your belly and back, and then you can start going into crawling and develop like some walking and standing and balance. And then later on, you can get into some like throwing, catching, vaulting, climbing, but you don't just, like parkour is great, but that's one thing. It's interesting. You talk about you were doing one thing and it was all disorganized and you get it handled and it's like, whoa, it's kind of, I think similar with like parkour because it comes from natural movement, but just because, it's not like the practitioner's fault so much, just because of the way we're educated, people don't learn how to think things through step by step and really build that. But a lot of parkour is, you just do it. Okay, let's just do a Kong vault. Yeah. Or that looks
when you work with somebody who breathes backwards, when they, that instead of breathing in, the belly goes out. Instead, when they breathe in, the belly goes in. This kind of backwards, I call it backwards breathing. That's just what they do, and they really, being aware of it helps. Being aware of everything helps, but really helping them go back to, well, why is that like that, and how can I motorically, using more automatic systems in the lower brain, because that comes from the lower brain. Breathing is a lower brain. Why are you not breathing efficiently? Why are you not doing that? And yes, it can be tension or stress or trauma, but it can also be something else. Developmental key that you don't know yet. There could be other things going on there. So that's what we try to find. I consider myself a detective for neurodevelopment. So
just like a Montessori teacher, I like what Montessori said. It's like every Montessori teacher should be a scientist. There was a longer sentence than that. There's more to it, but that's part of it. Like,
it's just, yeah.
Well, she's right. And that helped me because that's what really got me on the path to doing what I do today, because I saw things I didn't understand. And I kept saying, why? Why is this child who's very intelligent and is, why are they struggling so much in their life? What is going on? And now I have a lot more of those answers, and it makes me happy. Help others.
Then to wrap up a little bit, I think some of us got to go pretty soon. Unfortunately, we can't talk longer. We'll have to do more discussions. But how long did you teach Montessori?
Let's see. I was in Seattle, and I started 2 schools there. And so it was really about 8 years, probably. I was in Montessori, and then we moved, and I had I was still doing Montessori for a while, but then I went into elementary because my kids were going into elementary and there was problems. So I had to, my Montessori went a little into elementary, but not high enough. And I had to try to figure out why things weren't working the way they should be. I have 4 opposite children who all had differences. Who doesn't? And being a mother that I was, I wanted them to have the best development they could have. So it took a lot of my focus, a lot of my time, but they were my case studies kind of. And it was not too long after that I became an administrator at a school. And that was a mistake because I am not an administrator. It's not what I do. It's not my thing, So I ended up getting out of that. And that's when I went and got my master's degree in human development and really got going on what I'm doing.
And then did you entrepreneurially help start some of the schools going, or did you just someone else started it? And, okay, cool.
No, I must have started. I think I've counted at least 4 schools that I've started directly, and a lot of them I've helped start. So yeah.
Which Montessori organization did you get your credentials from?
There you go. My teacher didn't believe in that. She was a teacher who actually studied under Maria Montessori herself. Wow. That's how old she was. And she was out of St. Nicholas in London. And she did not believe in our American system of alphabets. So none of those, none of the above.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Classic, I guess you'd call it.
But, just quick, while I'm thinking about it, people ought to look up, maybe I'll post it in the show notes, a documentary about Maria Montessori. Great person. It's like all the stuff she did in life. Jeez. Amazing.
It's funny, even the stuff on diet, when we read it back in the 70s and 80s, we were going, oh, she's saying high fat for children. That's not good. She turned out to be right about that too.
Yeah. Genius.
Everything she said was right.
Yeah. She's someone that everyone should have as some kind of hero. More Americans should be talking about and praising her and not John Dewey. We'd be much better off.
Well, and her material that, she's written stuff and there's a lot written about her, but her own words are very accessible. I mean, it's not, esoteric kind of above our heads as average, people here. She's very easy to read, and it's so interesting seeing her figure out a problem and see how the children just totally loved it. She gave them what they needed, and they absolutely flourished and bloomed. I encourage everybody to read her stuff. She's amazing.
Definitely, 100%, totally. I read a lot
especially
of her books.
the sensitive periods. Yeah, it's really
so many
beautiful.
Can't say enough good things about her.
Yeah.
Except that she's dead. Well, I mean, that's not a good thing, but I wish I could meet her. Jeez. That'd be so awesome.
Well, I felt honored to meet somebody who met her. So.
Yes, knew her. That's great. Yeah.
But so we better wrap it up, unfortunately. I'll have to do more, but any last words, Melanie?
No, just thank you so much, Janet.
You're so welcome.
Learned a ton.
Any last words, Janet?
No, I think just tune in and listen to your body and your lower brain and understand that there could be other causes than what you're being told. Yeah.
So I think one basic idea is remember that reality is broader and precedes science. We don't necessarily, we don't want to be irrational and stupid, but we don't have to necessarily wait for science to, so-called scientists to tell us something. And then sometimes scientists are different than science, and scientists can get it wrong. And there's plenty of that in the history of, human history. History of science, you look at that, mistakes, wrong turns, all over the place.
Yeah, science, unfortunately, is not good with systems. It doesn't study systems very easily. It's very difficult to study them because we're into variables and stopping things to study them, but systems don't stop and they're hard to isolate. And that's why we're a little behind with this. But we're catching up. It's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, there's more people doing systems thinking and ecology and like J.J. Gibson looking at perception and context of how we move through the environment. So there's some good things nowadays, but I just remember just like all three of us have made some mistakes, but it's not our fault. Don't feel guilty. Just try to do the best for yourself and your kids and students. But
don't be afraid to go against the mainstream.
Yeah.
Don't just do what everybody's doing because it must be okay. It must be the right thing. So.
Yeah, no, I think a good thing for people to look at to start with on that is read like The Soul of a Horse by Joe Camp. Excellent book about how he and his wife Kathleen started with horses, and they were very conventional in their thinking, and then they started to learn, it's like we need to think for ourselves, and convention is not always right, and there's other ways we should take care of the horse so we can have a good, healthy, loving relationship with it, and so the horses can be the best they can be and thrive. Then you can get that and extend it to like taking care of ourselves and people and students and children. Similar concept, but it'd be a good model for thinking. But well, cool. So great conversation. Thank you very much, Janet. Absolutely loved it. Fascinating. I'm gonna have to listen to this a few times because there's so much good information in it.
Yeah.
But cool. So hope you enjoyed it, folks. And if you'd like more conversations like this and better quality recordings and everything, if you could contribute, donate on Patreon and PayPal. We got a link in the show notes. We'd appreciate it. If you think these ideas are worth spreading and we need more of this for ourselves and our children and our students and our culture, we could use some support because Melanie and I are starving artists. We sure can't do it on our own. So,
and they can share too. Share the podcast. They can share the podcast so that more people can benefit.
Yeah, share it. Send it to your friends, teachers, principals, administrators. Give some likes and some good comments on the podcast app that you use. We'd appreciate it. But so hope you enjoyed the podcast. And if you could help out, it'd help the culture, help you. It's not just helping us. We want to make it a better world too. But thank you for listening. And we have more podcasts coming up soon. And you can check out the others we've done. And again, thank you.